Hi everybody, and welcome to our first edition of At Home Math. I wanted to start this week with a quick review of what we were working on before when we last saw each other in March. We just began our fraction unit and we were talking about making fair shares. The first thing we were talking about, we discussed equal shares. We used the example of the brownie pan, and we decided that if this pan was shared between 3 people, it wasn't really fair because each part was uneven. If this brownie pan was shared between 2 people, we also agreed that this was an unequal share. Both people do not get the same amount. So we came to the conclusion that we needed to create fair shares. This would be a better representation of 2 fair shares, and this would be a better representation of 3 fair shares. And it wouldn't matter which piece we got because they would be relatively equal. This pan, if I were to have 1 part out of the 2 parts, I would have half the pan. And if I was sharing this with somebody else, they would have 1 part out of the 2 parts total. We would each get half of the pan. And in this example with the brownie where there's 3 parts, if one person was having this part, they would have 1 out of the 3 parts. Another person would have 1 out of the 3 fair shares, and a third person would have 1 out of the 3 fair shares. Next, we talked and learned some new vocabulary. We learned the word numerator and the word denominator. And we agreed that the numerator really stood for the part and the denominator was the whole, represented the whole. So in this example, the part of the brownie pan that I had is 1, so the numerator is 1, and the denominator is 2. The whole pan is 2 parts. That's what the 2 represents. In this brownie pan example, where we were splitting it 3 ways, the numerator is 1, that's 1 part. The denominator is 3, which represents the 3 parts of that whole pan. The third thing we did before we left was we made our own fraction toolkits. Okay? And the fraction toolkits are pretty big to show under this document camera, so I'm going to actually use something that's a lot smaller, and that will help us. The biggest discovery with the fraction toolkit was that we realized that the smallest pieces had the bigger denominator. And the conclusion you came to, and it made sense to you, was, well, that simply meant that you were sharing it with more people. There were more fair shares when this was split between 8 people instead of 3 people. So the more people you're sharing it with, obviously the smaller the pieces get. So that's a quick review of what we worked on before break. We made our fraction kits, we talked about numerators and denominators, and most importantly, we talked that fractions here were equal shares. Today I want you to try the Kahoot in your outline to test your knowledge of what you know, and we'll talk later in the week about fractions on a number line. Good luck.